All right, welcome back to another episode of Just Buy Less Coffee, answering the deeper questions of American politics. My name is Troy, aka Keep Troy Blue. With me, as always, is Cathy Cannon, aka Cannon's fodder. Hunter Biden guilty on all charges. We were just talking about this before the show. I don't care. I do not care.
Yeah,
He's a
right.
private citizen. He fucked up. He's gonna pay the consequences for some shitty stuff he did. It doesn't mean shit. Like,
Also, you
not
know
a
what I
single
love?
Democrat is bitching or moaning or saying the trial was rigged. It's just
You know what I
crazy.
think is funny about it though? It's like they're like, "Oh, Hunter Biden guilty on all charges." I'm like, "Yeah, all three. How many was your guy
Yeah,
guilty?"
yeah,
I'm like, "All three."
yeah.
It's like not all 34 with 80 something else pending. Like it's fine. It's
A
fine.
tenth of the Trump
Yeah, no,
stuff.
quite literally less than a 10.
Less than a tenth. We got President Biden speaking in what should be momentarily. We can hop to him live for a little bit to see what he says about Hunter. He just said that he will not pardon Hunter. His Justice Department is who indicted Hunter in the first place. It was federal charges. It was a special prosecutor. So I don't know how you can possibly make the argument that Biden is some sort of like corrupt tyrannical dictator. He's prosecuting his own fucking son, and he said he won't pardon him. So you think
Well,
Donald Trump wouldn't pardon fucking Don Jr. on charges like this?
seriously. But to that, I'll say, and like, this is a good opportunity to kind of like clarify the narrative on the Justice Department. I wouldn't even say it was Biden's Justice Department that did it. And the
Right.
Justice Department is supposed to be an independent, like, kind of thing. Like, does it fall under the purview of the executive branch? Yes, but it's also supposed to operate completely independent of the executive branch. So, it's not like Joe Biden was like, "Sorry, Hunter, I got to throw you in jail to make the Democrats look innocent." No, that's not what's happening, right? Nor is it that he's like, "Hey, Justice Department, go after Donnie. I'm in trouble over here." None of that is happening. That's not supposed to happen. In fact, the reason Donald Trump is talking about how the justice system is rigged is because his like the Justice Department for him wouldn't do those things, and he thought they were like being mean
Yeah.
to him because they wouldn't do that. No, they're not supposed to do those things.
Yeah. I mean, every president until Trump has recognized the basic independence of the Justice Department.
Except Nixon.
Well, except
Well,
Nixon. I guess you
yeah, I was
couldn't
gonna
really say
say.
that about Nixon. Nixon didn't either. But so Nixon and Trump. That's like good
Nixon
company.
and Trump. I was gonna say
But
it's
Trump,
quite the
like
list to be on.
Nixon was just a dick. Trump didn't know. like he was like, what the fuck? You work for me. I tell you to prosecute somebody. You prosecute somebody. I tell you can't prosecute me. You can't prosecute me. He's like, I'm your boss. So he just didn't get it. He's just too stupid to understand how that fucking thing
Yeah,
works.
Nixon, it was straight up arrogance. Donald Trump, I think it was a mixture of arrogance and ignorance. Like, I have no fucking idea, so I think you should do this. Why can't you do this? You should be able to do this. It's me, right?
Well,
The
he's
two blended
technically
together.
he's technically not wrong is the thing, which is why I think we need like a constitutional referendum on separating the Justice Department from the president's control. I don't know. In light of like what Trump wanted to
Yeah.
do with the Justice Department, I don't know. We may need to revisit that. We're going to be talking maybe some potential constitutional changes later on in the show. Talking Senate today. We got a little bit of a Senate deep dive
Yeah.
prepped. But we will cut in on this Biden speech. When he jumps up here. Trump holds multiple rallies in hot areas. It is hot as fuck, Cathy. I know it's hot in Florida. It's hot here in Arizona. Donald Trump held a rally in Phoenix last week. It's 110 degrees outside. The rally was inside at the Dream City Church in Phoenix, which is Charlie Kirk's church. So he held a rally it was a Turning Point USA rally with Charlie Kirk. So indoors, but he made his people wait outside in line in security lines and checkpoints for hours to get into this church. It was in a parking lot, blacktop parking lot, no shade. They didn't provide water. They didn't provide anything. And a dozen people were hospitalized in Phoenix.
Wow.
So that was cute. That was a nice little touch for his.
I love that Charlie Kirk's church is in a fucking strip mall, by the way.
Yeah, it's
like the strip mall churches are fucking weird and like
yeah. It has a huge capacity. It's one of these like mega churches too. And then a few days later, this weekend, Trump held a rally in Vegas, and that one he did outside. They didn't even put that inside. It was in a park outside. The forecast for the day was like a high of 103. It got to about 102. But his campaign was downplaying the temperature because the low, like in the morning, it was going to be like 95. So they're like, oh, it's only going to be 95. Like, it's not
The
that big of a
low
deal.
was 95. That's disgusting.
I don't know if it was the low, but it was definitely like in the morning. I don't know if it was like the official low for the day, but
It's
like
probably the
in
dew point.
that morning, it was like 95 in Vegas, and
Gross.
Vegas is hot. Vegas is
Yeah,
fucking hot.
that's gross.
So they had cooling tents, and they had the wherewithal to like actually like try to prevent people from passing out. But they were outside in 102, watching this guy fucking talk. And he decided to take that moment to basically berate his supporters and let them know what he actually thinks of them.
Isn't that breeze nice?
Oh, there's a breeze.
You feel the breeze? Because I don't want anybody going on me. We need every voter. I don't care about you. I just want your vote. I don't care. See, now the press will take that and they'll say he said a horrible thing.
Yeah, no shit.
I don't care about you, just your vote. What?
Yeah. So he's telling the crowd not to leave because a breeze just kicked up. Later on, he tells them that if they pass out, he will have people come and pick them up and splash water on them. So basically just like shitting all over his people, just straight up telling them like he doesn't care about their safety. He just wants their vote. He just wants people in the crowd. He's basically just admitting it. I don't know if he thought he was being funny or what, but
he thought he was being funny. You know what it is? It's that he doesn't think it's hot because back in hell, this is just like Christmas. That's why he can wear the suit jacket. He's like, what? It's a balmy 97 degrees out here. My home in hell.
It had, but the breeze had kicked up, so he thought, everybody was gonna survive the Vegas heat. But what an asshole!
A dry heat breeze is not a breeze. That's like opening the oven door.
Yeah. Oh god, it's hot, boy. Just crazy hot. But anyway, so just not caring about his supporters. I can't believe I can't believe he held that rally outdoors in Vegas. That's insane to me. Oh, and the other thing, later on he said, all week people have been. I guess people were telling him not to hold it outdoors, and he was like, all week people have been telling me how worried they are about you. He's like, nobody mentioned me. Nobody cares about me. He's like, I'm the one up here sweating, or just full on being like, why is everybody worried about you? They should be worried about me.
This man, like, I don't want to, like, I don't even know what to say to it. And people like sit there listen, like, oh yeah, you're right. You know what? I should die for you, Donald Trump. What the fuck is wrong with people?
It's just such an abusive relationship. Like, the meaner he gets, the more they love him. It's so like, oh, it's so icky.
That's like literally what it is. It's a little bit like they're Stockholmed at this point, all of them.
Yeah.
And I've said that, right? Like a big part of it is their pride. At this point, they have to double down because they've supported him through so much. To admit that he sucks now is to admit that they have, in fact, been wrong this whole time. And it's pride. They like it's nose to spite your face kind of situation with
them. So the other big news from a few days ago is the UN approved Biden's ceasefire plan. The plan to withdraw Israeli troops, do a hostage exchange, and then for Israel to rebuild Gaza. I can't believe that's still on the table. But the UN passing the Biden ceasefire resolution, telling Hamas to take it. Benny Gantz quit the war cabinet. So we've been talking a little bit about Benny Gantz. He was the main opposition to Netanyahu. Then they formed a unity government. And now Gantz is out. Gantz is back to being opposition. Couldn't take it anymore. Just couldn't stand that guy who couldn't stand BB's politics. Stated that he was frustrated at the lack of a strategic direction for the war, which is what Biden has said too. Again, they're just getting into the quagmire, permanent occupation type stuff, which we know patently well does not go well. So Benny Gantz is out. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And remember, Benny Gantz is the one who back in April called for an early general election, right? Like, hey, this bullshit coalition government isn't working, so we should probably call for, because they're not scheduled for an election until 26 or 27. 26, I think, maybe. But he called like back in April. He was like, yeah, we need to have that election now. Like, I think we should go ahead and do that. Remember, then he came and met with Biden officials here. He then went to Canada and he met with Justin Trudeau's war people, military, defense, state people, State Department people. There we go. I found it.
Here's the word.
Yeah, so he's met with American military like representatives and diplomats. He's met with Canadian military representatives and diplomats now, or he's called for elections in his own country. And in the wake of increasing protests against Benjamin Netanyahu, he's quit the war cabinet.
Yep.
I'd say that's an interesting development.
It's very interesting, and I'm interested to see what he does now. So again, that goes back to being opposition, which means Netanyahu's party is on their own. Netanyahu's party, I guess, has enough of a lead where Netanyahu's job isn't threatened unless they leave him, which they could do if he gets behind. The right wingers could walk out on Netanyahu if he gets behind this ceasefire deal. But
he's in an interesting place. Like if he doubles down with the right wingers that are pushing him to just kind of lay waste to Gaza, he's gonna lose every ally he's got. Like Europe will back away, we'll back away. Like there's no chance. So his choice is literally like rock hard place. It's do what Biden says or be completely alone in the world. And Israel alone in the world does not survive. Let's just be real. So,
yeah. Well, they're officially a pariah state. He's a pariah leader. Potential war crimes charges coming in his waning years. So
I know. I saw something on Twitter. I'm just jumping in before I forget because my brain. I saw somebody like criticizing like Putin. Like this is what happens when you put criminals in charge of your government. Like Putin's in power to avoid, being a criminal. Benjamin Netanyahu also, this is what happens when you let people run for the government so they don't have to face charges. So we have a Putin, we have a Netanyahu. Those are the examples of what happens when you elect criminals, America, for no particular reason whatsoever. I'm pointing these things out to you. Wink, wink. Yeah. So that's all. Yeah, that's what I got on that one.
Maybe don't elect, convicted felons who are just trying to get out of their charges or running for office.
Who start wars to avoid criminal prosecution, right? Like
Rick Scott sort of was the founder of that strategy when he ran for Senate to get out of his like massive fraud charges. He like defrauded like billions of dollars out of Medicare. So he's like, hey, I'm going to run for Senate so I don't go to prison.
I think, no, he ran for governor and it was like before, it was in 2010. Yeah. And the whole thing was going on. And oh God, that still makes me so mad. And it makes me so mad to this day. I still love using this as an example in my class about voter turnout and how you end up with shitty people. And I love using Rick Scott because the kids call him Voldemort, which is appropriate. I think he has Voldemort energy.
Yeah, he's got the bald, creepy vibe.
Yeah, they're like, how did he get elected governor? And I was like, let me tell you a story about 2010, right? Whilst on trial for, fraud, for ripping off the government for billions of dollars for Medicare and basically tanking hospitals so he could profit off of them. He let people die for money and then got elected governor of Florida. How? Because 27% of Florida voters turned out in 2010 to vote for the gubernatorial election. 27% of voters total turned out, which means about 13% of voters selected the governor. So, and then I always tell them, I'm like, think about 10 people. Okay. Is one of them an idiot? Because that person picked the governor of Florida in 2010.
Wow. Why were people so, I guess 2010 was a brutal midterm for turnout.
Well, 2010, especially Florida, remember, we were hit really hard by the housing crisis. Our unemployment rate was really high, right? So we're kind of a laid back kind of who gives a fuck state anyway. And in a laid back who gives a fuck state where nobody has a job or money, the last thing you care about is an off-year gubernatorial election when your state has been run by the same party since 1998.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It's like the Republicans in Texas saying, elect us to change things when you've been in power for like 3 decades.
Right. And it was Charlie Crist running against Rick Scott as well. So it was a former Republican turned Democrat against a Republican. It was just like, so Floridians back in 2010, it was so no matter what, we're fucked. Got it. So they didn't care.
Rick Scott is now a major contender to be Mitch McConnell's replacement. He wants to be Senate Majority Leader.
That is,
and he's on the
one, not
MAGA.
surprising.
He's on like the MAGA track. He's like the he's taking the like pro Trump. The other one, God, there's two others. Who the fuck are I can't remember. The other one are much more like more moderate, like more sensible. Not, you know, I don't want to say that Mitch McConnell was like moderate or sensible, but like more along the Mitch McConnell vein, like not Trump's bitch.
I thought I saw Tom Cotton wanted to be on the list, but he's not exactly moderate.
I think he was flirting it, but I don't think he officially put his hat in. Let me who is running for Senate?
Majority Leader. I saw Mitch McConnell wrote like this op-ed piece where he's basically like, none of this is my fault. It's all your fault, Mitch. It's all your fault. I hate
anyway,
Mitch
I'll
McConnell.
look that up and figure out who's
Yeah.
doing that. Anyway, Rick Scott is thrown his hat in to be sort of the Trump takeover of the U.S. Senate. I don't think Rick Scott and Mitch McConnell like fucking hated each other. So
everybody hates Rick Scott. I mean, look at him. Who could that's a face not even a mother could love. You know what I mean?
Let's talk a little. Let's tease up some Euro stuff real quick. Let's talk some Euro elections before we get into the Senate stuff. So we had the European Union elections over the weekend. Everybody's talking about like the far right just took over Europe. Well, not really.
No, they did.
Everybody's like shitting their pants on this. Like, the far right did overperform, and by that they got like 10% of the vote, gained like 6 or 7 seats. They're still in the minority in the Parliament of the European Union. The one place where they did shine was in France, where Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party, which is basically French Nazis. I mean, they're literally like
French Nazis. That's literally what they are. They're the leftover Vichy government.
Like the Vichy government.
Yeah, I was gonna say the leftover Vichy government.
Like, what the fuck? They got 31% of the vote in these Euro elections. Macron, the president of France, his party got 15%. So he just was absolutely spanked by the fascists, and his like, what the fuck is going on with? I was talking to this with Ray yesterday. It's like, what the fuck is going on in France? Like, why the fuck are they? Why is France like voting for Nazis and Germany's like going further to the left? Kind of, it's just kind of reversed. Is France going to invade Germany? Is that what's going to happen now?
Bro, I wouldn't have had that on my bingo card, but like, have I ever told you one of my funniest jokes that I love from having taught European history for a long time?
I don't know, maybe.
Why are there trees planted down Champs-Elysees?
No.
Because Hitler likes to march in the shade.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that true? Isn't that
pretty much?
They wanted like a backdrop for the picture or something?
Yes, Nazis don't like sun because they're German.
Well, Germans are very pale.
They don't have it there. I was going to say they don't have it there. They're like, what is this nonsense?
Yeah, Germans burn very easily. So anyway, Marine Le Pen's far right National Rally Party, basically the French Nazi party, taking the majority of the vote, or the plurality of the vote, 31% of the vote in the French election. So everybody's freaking the fuck out. I think people in France have every right to be freaking the fuck out, because what happened was Macron, after that disastrous showing by his party, Macron dissolved the French National Assembly and calls for snap elections. So in Europe, heads of government can do that. They can just dissolve parliament and call for new elections. Strange timing for Macron to do that. His party's probably going to get wiped out in those elections. Also, the Olympics are coming up in a couple of months. They're going to be in the middle of like government turmoil while Paris is hosting the Olympics. So a whole, everybody in the National Assembly has to run for their seats again. There may be some new people that win those elections, maybe some hardriders. And if Le Pen's party gets the majority in the National Assembly, he's going to have to nominate a far right prime minister. So it could be really, really awkward. He's not up for re-election until 2027. So he's going to be president for a little bit longer. So you could have this like Macron presidency with like a far right National Assembly. Anyway, it's really it's getting really weird and ugly and icky in France with all these hardriders. So yeah, I don't know.
I just when I first heard he was calling for elections, the joke that just jumped out of me, Troy, I can't help it sometimes, was, is it on a tennis court by any chance? Because that's the
Oh,
fucking
boy.
funny thing about like, I don't know if you've noticed this about French people, but they love fucking protesting. They love fucking
They
complaining
do.
about shit. So I can't imagine how they will survive in a world with a fascist government, because fascists don't like people complaining, and the French fucking complain as a profession. Like, it's required with
It's literally their
citizenship.
job.
Like, give me 5 things to complain about now for entry into our country, right? Like, it's all they know how to fucking do. I'm allowed to hate the French people. I'm British, okay? I want to be clear.
And the things that they like riot about, like I remember when the federal government will do your laundry in France. By the way, like they have all these
Really? I
like
didn't know that.
incredible social services. Like you can sign up for government laundry. They decided to cut that, and people rioted. People rioted about the cut in the federal laundry. But
I was like, if you think Americans are quick to the streets to protest, you have not met the French, okay? And that's why I'm like,
God, I
part
love
of
the
me
French.
isn't worried. I know, right? Like, part of me isn't worried about it because I like the French. But part of me is worried about it because the fucking French, like, they're also the type of people that'd be like, let's fuck you on your government and vote for the fucking fascists, right? But then they will immediately have to have a tennis court party to kill the fascists.
I don't
So,
understand. Like there is a solid functioning left wing in France. I don't know what the fuck they've just completely shit the bed and fell asleep or something. I don't know.
yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of like these videos from these poor like college students in France and these like young kids in France that are just terrified now and like thinking they're gonna have to leave and like where are they gonna go, and like France is undergoing a little bit of a crisis moment like we are in a little bit, just worried about what the future is gonna hold with their government.
A little bit. And in part, it's because their government is fucking weird the
It is
way
weird.
our government is fucking weird. Like, I remember once I pulled up like a flow chart of like how their government works. Because, you can pull up the American one. It's like federal, like the executive branch, Congress, and like you can kind of see who does what, right? You pull up France's and it looks like a fucking like microeconomics curve of average cost curves. So it's like the parliament does this and the National Assembly does this, but then the prime minister does this, but ministers do this, but then there's a constitutional council, but then there's also like, it's just so
This is very complicated.
the only country that makes our government look straightforward is France.
Well, we're about to get into that because I want to talk a little bit about like whether we should start adopting things from other countries.
Just not France.
But anyway, so this was just the EU, just to bring it back, like this was just the EU election. This was just for European Parliament. And again, the far right parties looks like they're going to control about 20% of seats in the EU Parliament. The centrist coalition is still in place. The pro-Ukraine coalition is still in place. It's not like people are trying to spin it like the fascists took over Europe or whatever. That's not what fucking happened. They overperformed in like 2 countries, France being the biggest one. So everyone can just calm down. But I am my heart goes out to the French people and who are worried about what their future is. So we'll see how that election goes. So there will be an election this summer for the French Parliament. We'll see how that goes. Maybe people will be spooked by Le Pen's party and will show up to vote. More people will show up to vote. Who knows? We'll see.
Well, like I said to you the other day when we were talking about it, right? Like the UK is holding their elections on July 4th, which is my favorite thing in the world. P.S. Like July 4th, American Independence Day, is the day that the British people are going to throw the Tories out of power. There's something magical about that to me. Plus, it's like, what is it? 30 years after Thatcher died, her party follows her. It's fine. I'm enjoying this a little bit. But 2024 is shaping up to be like the year of democracy, right? Because we keep saying democracy's on the ballot here, but like the UK has called for their elections and now France has called for their elections. So the UK, France, and the United States, which are 3 pretty big beacons of Western democracy, I would say, right? When you think Western democracy, those are probably the places that immediately, come to mind. The Allied powers, it's fine, whatever. But they're all having elections at the same time, right? Like within weeks of each other. So it'll be UK. I think UK is before France. I can't remember.
UK will be probably, I don't think they have a date for France yet, but I think it'll be after the UK.
Yeah, one. But because they need I think it's a 60, because their elections only last 60 days, not 60 years like ours. Whatever, it's fine. So you'll have UK in July. You'll probably have France in either late July or early August, and then you'll have us in November, right?
Yeah.
So
Big
that
ones. 3
means
big
that,
ones.
that means there's 2 huge elections that can serve as like bellwethers for what we're going to do. And one thing about Americans is like we do tend to like to be on the winning team of things, and that's why I hope Britain is first, because France too doesn't want to be the stupid ones. So if the British people are smart enough to kick the conservatives that have ruined their country out of power, I would like to think the French aren't going to be like, yes, you know what, we are the conservatives compared to Britain. Never has France been the conservative compared to Britain. No. Okay, so if Britain is going left, France is not going right.
It would be pretty shocking.
Yeah, like unless the world is upside down and we have wandered into I don't want to tempt fate with that one, but you get what I'm saying. Like I can't.
It still fucking baffles me that the French people are like on the verge of like electing the Vichy government. Like, I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but
and I think we were talking about this a little in the pre-show, and it's more that they hate Macron than that they like her. And again, because the French tends to be a bit spiky and French. They, especially in the EU, because the EU doesn't really have any like enforcement authority, it's like a fun play government kind of body, if you will. So I feel like that's a safe place for them to let the fuckery go. And in a way, this is Macron's way of kind of giving them the finger back. Like, okay, fine, you want to pretend that you like the fascists, go ahead and make them accountable to you here. And so I think it was the people trying to say fuck you, Macron, and Macron coming back with an okay, fuck you. And
again, he didn't have to dissolve Parliament. I mean, he could have just like licked his wounds and
there's a king named Charles though, so somebody was going to disband Parliament.
Oh God.
I just didn't see it being the French, but you know what? It's fine. I just work here. Fine. I'm fine.
The other thing was my Irish buddy who gives me insight on this stuff told me that Macron's party, it's technically not even a party. It's like he calls it like a movement. Like his whole thing was like, we don't have a party, we have a movement.
You know what?
But as a result of that, he has like no organizational capability whatsoever, and like no leadership and no like nothing. It's just like a totally abstract concept.
Seriously, he's been like a fluke politician to me since he showed up, right? Like his whole thing gives me a little bit like Omen vibes, I hate to say. Like, I'm not saying he's the Antichrist. I'm just saying there's something really fucking weird and unsettling about his whole vibe. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't understand. Like he came in like he was fucking some revolutionary leader or something.
That's what I'm saying.
He's like dead center. He's a centrist. He's a European neoliberal. Like that's why everybody can't stand him, because he pisses everybody off. He pisses off the right. He pisses off the left. Like he can't figure out what he is. He doesn't have a party. He doesn't have a place. And he's just this like quintessential just douchebag politician
who like married his band teacher. It will never not bug me. Like as an educator, I think that's why this bugs me so much. Is like he was 15 or something when he met her. She was like married and in her 40s. His parents like let him hang out with her and stuff. It was just he was groomed from the gate by I don't know, the whole thing just makes me, I don't know. And he has that like dead eye kind of stare. The way he just looks a little bit like a robot. I don't know. I don't know. There's something wholly unsettling about Emmanuel Macron to me.
Well, anyway, do you want to tease? So that's our little teaser of like 10-minute teaser of the EU. Do you want to talk about your deep dive? Probably next week we'll cover the rest of it.
So like next week, what I was gonna do is I was gonna do a little bit what to expect from and how those elections will work. Okay, so unpacking the EU elections a little bit, like more than we did here, but speaking more to how the elections in France function, like versus the way our elections function. Because a lot of people in America don't realize that we don't have federal elections in America. Like states run elections here, but that's not how it works there. So like just to explain how Parliament like what it looks like to vote in a country with multi-parties, because people talk about it all here. Oh, we need a multi-party system. Well, the reason we don't have one is because our system doesn't really allow for one, because we elect candidates, we don't elect parties. Typically in multi-party democracies, you vote for the party, and the party designates the what are they called? MPs from there.
Yeah.
Which is a similar way to the way we used to elect our Senate, which we will get into in Troy's deep dive today. So we're tying things together in a pretty little bow for, you know.
I'd also love to get your rundown next time on the UK election too, how it's going to go down.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to do. I was going to talk about like the way UK does it, the way France does it, how they're the same, how they're a little bit different versus the way we do it. Like I was going to do a three-way comparison.
We're gonna have a three-way?
Okay. I was going to have a three-way with Britain and France.
Three-way with Britain and France. We've been having a three-way with Britain and France for a while.
The Menage a Trois Allied Power Edition. I don't know. I was trying to be funny.
But give us a rundown on like the Labour versus the Tories and like where they're all at. How bad the Tories have been for the last 15 years.
I can do a rundown of how many fucking prime ministers they've gone through since the last general election. Oh, this will be fun. Oh, yes. Okay. Just now I'm excited. I was excited anyway, but now I'm really excited. I love trashing the Tories. The only thing I like better than trashing Republicans is trashing Tories, but it's because they're the same thing. They're the same thing.
UK not posting results in the Euro elections because they had Brexit. They're not part of the European Union, so they don't get to play.
Yeah, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
So that would have been interesting had they. Oh, that would have been a really interesting tell because. But oh god, Tories are going to get destroyed. I'll save it for next week, but the Tories are going to get destroyed. It's going to be great.
Yeah, you thought Macron's numbers were bad. Let's wait for the Tories in England. So I want to do a little deep dive here on the Senate. So the story here is that the Senate blocked or filibustered a bill from Chuck Schumer from the Democrats to provide protection for contraception. Which has like a 90% approval rating in the United States. Like no one disagrees that women should have access to contraception. But for some reason, we're now debating contraception in a post-Roe United States and IVF.
Some of us told you that would happen. Yeah, I remember very clearly warning people that this would happen. But whatever. Because
we're dealing with people that are so dumb that they believe that contraception and abortion are the same thing.
Yeah,
or that contraception it interferes with God's plan or whatever the fuck.
Every sperm is sacred.
Yeah, I was like, what?
Hope like they're all in Catholic school or whatever.
I hope you're not wasting any sperm there, buddy. Doing your thing.
But it reminds me of that scene in Legally Blonde. For that matter, any masturbatory emissions that clearly not seeking an egg could be termed reckless abandonment.
Yeah. You'd be getting the death penalty for the amount of
Yeah, not me, but I get what you're saying.
No, these
name
people.
A few.
Yeah.
Not
you at all.
No.
Yeah.
Definitely not me.
Anyway, so the contraception stuff is being debated. Senate blocked it. So I thought we'd just talk a little bit. So the filibuster is what really kills the Senate for me. Also the lack of proportional representation. I mean, 2 senators for every state is fucking ridiculous. It might have made sense for the founders. It made more sense we'll get into this too, but it made more sense pre-17th Amendment with the Senate representing states, not people. So, states having equal representation and, looking out for the interests of the states in a united, federal coalition. That made sense back in the day. It kind of doesn't make sense anymore. 17th Amendment letting people elect senators directly. It's just kind of a second Congress, so we just have 2 Congresses that kind of do the exact same thing, except the Senate is
actually getting each other's way.
Each other's way, and the Senate has weird shit like the filibuster, and it's just weird and it's stupid, and they just fuck everything up. So I wanted to kind of look, like in no universe should California with 40 million citizens be represented by 2 senators, and that's the same as like Wyoming, who has like 600,000 citizens or something like that.
We do the math in my class when we go over the Congress and the legislative branch. It takes 3 California votes to equal 1 vote in Wyoming in the electoral college.
It sucks, and people in California know that, and it's really annoying to live in like the biggest most powerful state and just be like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You do have proportional representation in the House of Representatives, but that's what we're going to get into here.
Ish.
It's lacking because we've capped
Yeah.
it at 435. There should be, at this point, there should be like upwards of 800 representatives, I think.
Yeah, it's the Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929 that broke the House, and it's arguably the 17th Amendment that broke the Senate, but it could also easily be the filibuster. The Senate is, I think, maybe an institution that needs to either go away or be reworked.
Well, that's what I want to talk about is like, should we just scrap it? And this is all, just in our wildest dreams. Like it would take a constitutional amendment to do anything. That's not going to happen.
Right.
The Senate is not going to abolish itself, or maybe even reform itself unless we have like a constitutional convention. So this is just all for funsies, and what we would do to the Senate. And if you have any, if the listeners have any thoughts, reply in comments or reviews, or let us know, send us messages, let us know. But I wanted to have like a Senate discussion. So really the Senate in other countries, the upper house in other countries, most other republics, democracies have bicameral legislatures. They have an upper house and a lower house, just like we do. But the upper house is much more just about advisory and deliberation, and really embracing that, like, the upper house is where you go for like the wisdom and the the cordial politeness and the discussion, and that's really what our Senate was intended to be. It was intended to not be the people's house. It was intended to be what's the word I'm looking for, Cathy? It was where the statesmen went and debated and like it was much more cordial than the people's house and the House of Representatives, where things can get big.
Benjamin Franklin referred to it as the saucer that cooled the tea of the legislative process. It was in a similar vein. It was like advise and consent. Those are the words that appear in the Constitution with respect to the Senate. They advise and consent on legislation from the House. They advise and consent on treaties from the executive branch, and they advise and consent on presidential appointments. Somewhere along the line, they added in, let's legislate too. Like once upon a long ago, the Senate wasn't supposed to introduce legislation, point blank, period. And once that changed, so too did America.
I think that's what we kind of have to get back to. We have to get back to sort of like laws should come from the House. Like legislation should come from the people, the House. The Senate should advise and consent. Whether we want to get into like straight up veto power is a whole other thing, but the Senate should not be just this cesspool of filibustering and politics, and it's killing our democracy. Anyway, so some examples of how the upper house works in other countries in this advisory and consent role. We were just talking about France. So France is actually somewhat similar to the United States. So their upper house is called the Senate. They can do a lot of the same things that the National Assembly can do. They can introduce bills. They pass bills in the American model. Most bills do pass both houses, both the National Assembly and the Senate before they become law. The National Assembly is definitely considered the lower house is definitely considered the much more powerful house and the much more important house. And I think that's something Americans have to wrap their head around, about the idea that like the lower house should be more powerful. But the thing the thing with the Senate is that, and this is somewhat interesting, is that if there's an irreconcilable disagreement between like the two different versions of a bill, like we do in the United States, like they have to be identical to pass both houses. In France, the National Assembly can just pass their version over the Senate. They can just be like, nope, fuck you, we're passing ours. We don't need your amendments. And that's something that's interesting. So that actually doesn't happen that often, but if there is a case where there's irreconcilable differences on the two versions, the National Assembly gets to just pass theirs. So that's
to avoid another French Revolution, kids. That's to avoid a tennis court incident.
And the other thing is with a lot of these is like these upper houses are not directly elected. Like the French upper house is not elected by the people. It's elected by the various municipalities, civic leaders in France. In Spain, the upper house may introduce bills, but all bills have to first pass the lower house, which is the Congress of Deputies. So everything starts in the Congress of Deputies. The Senate can kick some stuff over to them. Everything starts in the Congress of Deputies. Once it passes, then it goes to the Senate, where the Senate can deliberate. They can then pass the bill, or they can amend or veto the bill. But amended or veto bills then go back to the Congress of Deputies, where the Congress can decide what they want to do. They could take the Senate's amendments, or they could reject them, or they could reject the veto. They could just say, nope, fuck you, we're passing this anyway. So they can just completely ignore the Senate does get to amend and veto bills, but the lower house can just like remove the veto and pass it anyway, even if the Senate.
And how does that work? Does like the prime minister have to ultimately up and down it in those instances?
Once it passes, so it starts in Congress, goes to the Senate. If it passes the Senate, it's signed into law by the king and the prime minister.
Oh, that's right.
If it's vetoed or amended by the Senate, it goes back to Congress, and then Congress has the final say. They can either take the Senate's changes and pass it with those, or they can ignore everything the Senate did and just pass it again as is, and then it goes to the king and prime minister for signature.
So king and prime minister can't just say no, right? Like if it comes through the government, they have to agree to it.
Do they have a veto?
Yeah.
I don't believe the king certainly doesn't. And the prime minister, in theory, the prime minister should be like backing the bills that are coming out of his government. I think in theory the prime minister could veto, but I don't think it's ever happened.
Yeah, I was like, that's the part I was always curious, because I could honestly never catch on to that either, to be fair, because it doesn't happen a lot,
right?
To be able to tell, but that is actually interesting. It's an interesting idea to allow the legislative branch to have the legislative power. So wild thought, wild thought.
So that's how they do it. And in Spain, the Senate is somewhat popularly elected. It's like half and half. Half the Senate is elected by municipalities, and then half the Senate is elected directly by the people. Then you get into the UK. This is Cathy's favorite. You have the House of Lords.
You spelled Lords wrong in the outline, by the way.
Is it spelled wrong?
Yeah, Lords. Yeah. Oh no, you forgot the U. That's what it is.
I forgot the U. Lourdes. There you go, Lords.
We got to be pompous. No, I put it in the wrong spot now. Look at me go.
Now you can't even spell. You're like fucking up the outline here.
I know. I'm just, you know what? Leave me alone.
So House of Lords. So they basically are just an advisory, have almost no power at all. They can introduce bills. They can offer debate and suggestions and advice. Bills do pass the House of Lords, but it's largely just sort of a rubber stamp. Almost all the political power is with the lower house, with the House of Commons.
There's one thing I'm going to add in here, just as a point as to how fucking stupidly small our legislative branch is. And I know that sounds like a weird thing to say when there's 435 of them, but just to put into context for you, just in the House of Lords in the UK that is about the size of the state of Florida. So just their upper house has 784 seats.
Yeah.
So just one chamber of their bicameral legislature in their country that is significantly smaller than ours has twice as many people representing it. I'm just throwing that out there to people. For
how many does the Commons have? The Commons is pretty large too, isn't it?
The House, I have to, let me look up members, House of Commons.
So anyway, lower house, House of Commons has basically all the power. They can elect and remove the prime minister.
650 members. So together, there's close to 1,400 members of the UK government to our 500.
So Commons has 700, around 700 too.
Commons has 650.
Oh, okay. All right. So
yes.
And that's England. It's the UK with like the much smaller population.
Much smaller, way more representation. Like we did there's this really, really interesting article that you can find, and I can't remember. I want to say it's like ABC News or New York Times or something, but it's like a game you can play. Like if we increase the number of representatives in the House to get pure representation, we would need 981 House members.
It would be a lot. Yeah.
Like we would need to more than double the size of our House of Representatives to just equally like to hit one person, one vote kind of representation in the House. And that's not even touching the Senate.
And we don't do that because of fucking Republicans, because of small states, because of people that live in these states in these rural states where nobody lives. They want more power than people that live in cities. It's been true in this country for forever.
Yep. I just work here.
Ireland's similar. Upper house is very ceremonial. The one cool thing that the upper house in Ireland can do is they can force a national referendum. So if like the lower house tries to change the constitution or do something that's like crazy important, the upper house can kick it to the people, and they do national referendums to change their constitution.
Do me this. Tell me how to say prime minister in Irish, because I can never like.
Okay, you ready? So
yeah.
T. Shuck.
Taoiseach. That is like to spell it out there in radio land. It's Taoiseach, and say it again.
Taoiseach. Yeah.
I love the Irish language. And upper house.
Fits.
I know. Go on, say upper house because you got it in here.
Shened.
I thought it was Sinead. I don't know why I did, but I say everything wrong.
Shened.
Sinead and Taoiseach. I had this like Irish family of kids. No. I had this Irish family of kids who all came in, and it was really funny because it was like David and Jessica, and then like the youngest two just had completely Irish names. That was like, it's the same name as the girl from Succession, and I can't think of it now.
Siobhan.
Siobhan, right? It's Siobhan, but it's spelled like Shioban or something.
Yeah. I was
like, I give up.
Some of the Irish names are insane. I just typed the name of the lower house, and do you see it?
Dale. No. How do I say it? Tell me how to say it. Dal. That one I probably could have figured out a little bit easier, but I did not.
Yeah.
But yeah, Irish words are so fucking fun to me. I love them. Because they're just, I shouldn't say they're nonsense. It's my heritage and all that. But like, they're just like, meh.
And then the last example is Germany. And you were talking about like weird roadmaps. Holy God, the German government is insane.
But I have a little bit love the German government though. So.
Just crazy. Crazy about a different, like, offices and branches. So
they wanted lots of checks and lots of balances for some unknown reason.
I guess that's what happens. What happens with their experience. So the upper house is the Bundesrat. And what's different about them is that so bills come from the chancellor, and they have to first go to, and I'm just sort of now learning about this, so I don't have all the details, but they have to first go. So we have a German list. I know we have listeners in Germany. Don't yell at me. They have to first go to the upper house, the Bundesrat, to be reviewed and approved, and then they go to the lower house. And they can veto. They can straight up be like, nope, this is dying here. This is not even going to get a vote in the lower house. That's true, but only for certain things. Like they have jurisdiction over certain areas of society where they can be like, nope, this is not even going to see the light of day. And then on other things, their veto can be overridden by the lower house. So there's an example of like, they can do, they have a lot more power, but only over certain things. So like, I don't know, maybe our Senate should only be in charge of like foreign affairs or something like that. Like that would be the change that we would make.
That was actually a proposal that like one of my kids, because we have these little debates, like if you could change the government, what could you change? And that was one of the ones they suggested, was just remove the Senate from the lawmaking process altogether and leave them to just approve judges and treaties and shit. Right. Just, like they should just be the oversight branch and the point they made is that the House is a little bit too crazy for oversight. So maybe give them the rules, give the Senate the oversight, and like, que sera.
Yeah, that's along the lines of something that I was thinking. So like, what should we do? Like, should we adopt one or more of these systems? I really enjoy the idea. I like the idea of getting the Senate back to being sort of in the spirit of an upper house and advisory body. And maybe there's certain things that they have control over, like, judges and treaties. But I don't think that they should have to pass. I don't think everything should have to go through the Senate if it's already passed the House. That's something about that just really, really bugs me. And I think if you have
very elitist about it is why.
If you have proportional representation in the House of Representatives and something passes, look, you have the check of the president. It's not like, like they're worried about California and New York's going to run everything because they have the most representatives. If the House of Representatives passes something that's insane, it can still be vetoed by the president. I don't know that you need like the check of the Senate to keep the House from being out of control. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about
I
that.
mean,
But.
no, I mean, because it's also I'm kind of sick of them with their whole California and New York will run everything. Because California and New York, yes, they're big states, but so are Florida and Texas and Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And Pennsylvania is a pretty moderate state. Texas is a pretty fucking crazy state. And Florida bounces back and forth between moderate and crazy, right? So, like, you can't really say that there are just, all these liberal states will steamroll over everything. If that were true, we'd still have abortion rights, honey. Like, so,
Yeah.
like, I don't think so at all. But
if California was in charge, we'd have nothing but EV cars. Abortion would be legal everywhere. Weed would be legal everywhere, and we'd have universal healthcare.
Exactly.
So, the horror.
Like I said, like I give the kids a lot of like free reign in my class. Like we talk about all of these things and then I let them bitch about why everything's broken. And, then we go over, I'm like, all right, well, it's going to be your world one day. So if you could fix it, how could you fix it? Right. And they like playing that game. And then they realize that it's hard and they don't like playing it anymore.
Yeah.
But the most common ones I get, and let me see if I can find the website. But the one suggestion I got, had more than 435 members, was that if you took the framework of the House of Representatives right now and let that serve as the Senate, because to the point is it's supposed to be proportionally representative, but it's not at all in any way, shape, or form. But does a little bit meet the intended goal of the original Senate, because it is proportioned in kind of a way that balances the power of states a little bit. In a more, like, not in a perfectly like equal way, but in a more equal than current way, right? So it doesn't, the House right now isn't exactly an equal Senate, but is more in the spirit of what the Senate was meant to be. Because even when it was meant to be an equal chamber, it was meant to give smaller states more power.
Exactly.
Right?
It was never meant to be it was a compromise to help small states.
Yeah, but I'm going to put this in the private chat for you to look at, and I'm going to explain what it is. But it's on the website. It's 538. It's Nate Silver's fucking polling website, so be wary. But it's an article from 2021, and it's just called "What if the House of Representatives had more than 435 seats?" And it kind of goes on to explain why it's at 435 when that happens. And then it goes and shows you state by state, like population versus seats, and how evenly and how equally over or underrepresented they all are. And it lets you play with it, right? Like if you did the small state rule, which is basically the idea of taking the population of the smallest state and letting that be what one representative equals. So that would be the population of Wyoming. And then however many states of Wyoming your states have, they get an extra member, right?
That's a really good idea. Yeah.
One would think, right? But that would take our 435 House to 573 and still leaves a lot of people underrepresented.
Interesting. So so mathematically there should be close to 1,000 people in the House.
Right.
Like one person, one vote.
Yeah. So then there's another one, which is the cube root law, where you take the cube root of the total U.S. population and distribute representatives that way. And that gets us closer to equal representation. Still a few overrepresented, like Alaska is still overrepresented and Vermont is still underrepresented, but far more states are like at or close to even. But then 2 times cube root, which is the cubed root of the US population times 2. And that would give us 872 seats. And then the only states that are under or overrepresented is Wyoming is slightly overrepresented, but only by like 100,000 people. And South Dakota is underrepresented by about 90,000 people. So I'm fine fucking over North Dakota and Wyoming. They don't even count. Right. And because everybody else is like almost evenly represented. But that's 872 members in the House of Representatives. Right. And this would leave, hold on, it says with 872 seats in the House, the average state's population per congressional seat would be 14.3 thousand people.
Okay.
Whereas with the small state rule, it's 33.3 thousand people. And with the cube root, it's 23.2 thousand people. So And
in the Senate, it's
and in the Senate, it's 1 for every 22 million in California and 1 for every 12 in Wyoming.
One senator in California represents 20 million people.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's what I always love to talk about this, because a lot of people, like, it's easy to point to the US Senate and be like, obviously that's a problem because obviously, and you're not wrong, right? But what gets lost far too often, I think, is how underrepresented the House is as well.
Yeah.
Because when you put those two things together, then large states like California are underrepresented across the board. Like, they're not overrepresented in the House just because they have all those members. Like, they lost representation in this past census, even though their population grew. So imagine having more people in your states and fewer people to represent your state. That's what happens every single time we count Americans to California. And it's happened to California now. It happened to New York. And so far, Texas and Florida have been picking up seats, but they're fast approaching like the diminishing returns point, like the California hit, where like there are only so many House representatives and your population can only get so high. Like, once you reach a certain population, you will lose representation. And both California or both Florida and Texas are at that point of representative diminishing returns. And I guarantee you, because both those states are crazy, the second they lose a representative, they'll be like, oh, the system's rigged. They're trying to quiet us down because we're conservatives. No, it's because you won't let us have the appropriate number of representatives. It's fine. I just work here.
Biden is on. Let me see.
Oh, we're gonna cut to live news.
Just cut to live here for a couple of minutes and see what he's saying. Hold on.
We can make a difference. But the fact of the matter is, I remember well when you first started it with me, this extraordinary courage. You know, through your words, you help ensure that your son and all the victims of gun violence are not forgotten. They didn't die in vain. Through your love, you help prevent the next tragedy and save lives.
Every time for
gun. And through your action, you remember us will never let go of one thing that we must never, never lose. And I mean this. I know it's hard because I've gotten those phone calls too, saying I lost a son, a daughter, a wife. I know what it's like. But guess what? Never give up on hope. Hope, hope, hope.
Okay.
That is a very Democratic. That's very Democrat energy. Remember, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. He is trying to give people, like, in a time of despair. I think he's. I mean, I know I heard like 5 seconds of it there, but you can tell, like, he's setting his election up to be there. Like, we can still save this ship, man. We can still save the ship. Like,
he looks surprisingly well considering his son was just convicted. Just convicted of 3 felonies.
I mean, I think in a large way he knew it was coming. I think everyone knew it was coming.
I'm sure. I think Hunter knew it was coming too.
Yeah, and they're going to appeal it, and we all know that when you're rich and famous, nothing matters until the appeal is over. So.
There's like hecklers or something.
But yeah, but back to the representation thing. The only other thing I want to talk about a little bit, and I think we've done like a whole episode on it before, is the 17th Amendment, which is what changed.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on 17 because in theory, it's a good idea. It's always a good idea to increase direct elections.
Yeah.
Direct election of representatives in a democracy. But I think I'm with you. I think I don't love the 17th Amendment, but I want to get your thoughts on
it. The reason I don't I like the idea of it, right? Like your idea of giving people a say in their representation. But what I think it inadvertently did was limit Americans' representation, and it broke federalism. It broke federalism.
It did.
Like our government is fucking weird. I'm just going to go ahead and say it was designed to be weird on purpose, but the way it was designed worked as designed. And when we change things about it, that usually means we have to change other things about it because it was designed to work together. And when you start moving things, you have to start moving things. Like, think about it when you're rearranging your bedroom furniture. Like, I want to move the lamp from that corner to that corner. Well, once you move the lamp, well, you've got to move like the little shelf. And once you move the shelf, you've got to move the nightstand. Well, now you move the nightstand, you got to move the bed. And if you move the bed, you got to move the dresser. Right? Like, that's kind of what it is to change government. So, like, in the 17th Amendment was passed in the early part of the 20th century, like around the same time as like Teddy Roosevelt's progressive era, the populist era, the like that whole thing. William Jennings Bryan was a big proponent of the 17th Amendment.
Well, it was
Fine.
like, okay, yeah, it was part of this progressive thing. It was like, all right, well, if the Senate's going to have all this power, it should, because they were worried about party bosses because it was elected
Exactly.
by state legislatures, and state legislatures in like the 19th century were largely just controlled by like corrupt party bosses. So it
Right.
was
And that's what it was.
Anti-corruption move, basically.
And that's totally 100% what it was. Right. And it's why it went through, and it's why it was probably a good idea when it passed.
Yeah.
But I think it's had what we call in economics negative externalities, like things that maybe we should have foreseen, but we didn't foresee. But now that they've happened, we have to do something about. Now, I don't think you're going to get anybody to overturn the 17th Amendment at this point. We've gotten used to directly electing our senators, and that's just going to have, like, you can't, like, once you give people rights, it doesn't go well when you take them away. You'll notice, those of you paying attention to reality right now.
Yeah.
But what I think it did, without anybody thinking about that potential consequence, was it made people stop paying attention to their state elections largely.
Exactly.
Like, not entirely, but largely. Because
it kneecapped the power of the state legislatures on the federal level.
Exactly. Because that's what it was. It was like you were supposed to vote, because our government was always supposed to be local politics first. And the 17th Amendment inadvertently created a national election first kind of thing. And that's the reason why people like look to the president to fix all their problems all the time, when you should be looking to your governor to fix your problems all of the time. Because truthfully, you live in, like, I was trying to explain this to my mom the other day. I was like, every American lives under like 4 fucking governments all the time and only ever yell about the president, right? Like right now, I live in Apopka, which is outside of Florida. So I have my city of Apopka government. Then I have my Orange County of Florida government. Then I have my Florida government. Then I have my national government. So there's a mayor, a county, there's a city mayor, a county mayor, a governor, and a president, all in charge of me. There's 4 executive offices to which I answer, right? Just living in this little house in Apopka, right? And that's what people don't understand, is the idea of the country was supposed to be that you vote for your local people vote for your county people. Because remember, this is before cars and shit, right? Your county people vote for your state people, and your state people vote for your federal people. That's the chain of events. But as soon as we were able to vote right for our federal people, as soon as we put our senators right in place, it doesn't really matter who ends up in our state legislature anymore to us, because we'll complain to our county people, we'll complain to our city people, and then we'll complain to the president. Like, how many people write letters to their state legislatures? I know the answer to this, because every year when I teach government and I tell the kids, well, write a letter to your governor, or write a letter to your government, is what I say. And they're like, well, will Joe Biden even read my email? And I'm like, your government in this case is not Joe Biden. If you're mad about DMV wait times, Joe Biden cannot fix that. And it's remarkable how many people don't know that. But I do think it screwed up everybody's understanding of civics, because when they have a direct connection to a senator that has a direct connection to the president, they stop realizing that their federal government and their state governments function differently, have different purposes, and are supposed to work together, not against each other. I just think it
and then, you would have
state politics.
The senators would come from the legislatures, so they were representing the legislatures. They'd be like, look, the federal government's fucking over our state, and our legislature can't get X, Y, and Z done. Like, that was the representation. The people had representation with the House of Representatives. I just think it's redundant. I think it creates an unnecessary redundancy, which has the effect of excessively slowing down the process.
Yeah, exactly. Because the Senate wasn't supposed to be there to like draft or change laws that they wanted to change for their political purposes.
Right.
It's like you said, they are supposed to go, and like the Florida delegation within the Senate, like the 2 Florida senators, which go to the Florida legislature and be like, this is the revenue bill. Does this work for us?
Yeah.
Will this help Florida? Does Florida need anything else? And the role of the senators was to make sure that the state got what the state needed, because the House reps are fighting for District 10, District 27, District whatever. So they're making sure their
local.
district, they're making sure their district is getting the money. The senator is supposed to make sure that all the districts are getting money, right? So like Maxwell Frost might be fighting for Orlando, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I don't even know if she's still a person, actually. It might be fighting for Miami, but Marco Rubio would be there to make sure that fucking Yeehaw Junction is getting some money for the orange groves as well. That's a real place, by the way. Yeehaw Junction. It's a real place. Florida knows. Florida knows.
So is Celebration. That's a whole other show. We should dive into
That
that.
Celebration is like murder capital of Florida. It's not really, but it is. It's a little town that Disney built, and it's like weirdly like
Weird
popular
dystopian.
among.
Yeah.
It's like serial killers are from Celebration. Like just a few years ago, there was a guy who offed his whole family and like lived in the house with their rotting corpses for like a month, and then tried to kill himself with Benadryl. It was fucking weird. Like, Florida is a hell of a drug, man.
I kind of like the Spain model. So okay, so Spain again. You're talking about like proportional. So Spain, there is like half of the Spanish Senate is directly elected, or a percentage of it. But they do that thing. So there's 19 what they call autonomous communities in Spain, basically like their states. So every one of those gets at least one senator, and then they add one more for every 1 million residents. So it does have that like sort of population proportion based on a certain number of people, representing a certain number of people. But I kind of like their model. So it is directly elected, but they do have it's just much more of an advisory role. Like the lower house can just pass what they want to pass without the Senate standing in the way, but you do take the Senate's considerations into it. So I don't know. I just think there's a better way to do it than to just have two houses that do the exact same thing, and they have to agree on everything for the bill to pass. It just takes so long. It just takes so long to get anything done.
It's just like,
and I think if you're gonna take away, like you said, you're never gonna take away direct election of senators. I just think so. You can't take away too much of their, you can't take away too much of the power of the people and how they've responded and how they use the Senate to represent their constituents. But I just think there's a better use of the Senate than to just be this like cesspool of filibustering. And maybe it just comes back to, getting rid of the filibuster and actually having the constitutional purpose of the Senate, which is a majority, which is 51 votes passes the Senate. That might be the
and I think that's like the biggest one. Like this past year, and I think I sent it to you to watch because I was really proud of my kids who did this one. But they did for their civic engagement project. They all had to like pick a political issue and research it and like basically teach the issue through a presentation. And one group did like the Senate filibuster, and they made a really good point in their video that I loved them for making, is that the language of the Constitution is very clear about like vote thresholds and totals. Like when they want a vote threshold to exist, they spell it out. 2/3 to do this, 3/4 to do this, 3/5 to do this, simple majority to do this, right? A 50% plus one to do this. Like they lay it out there quite clearly when they think larger thresholds are required, right? But they very specifically said that a simple majority should pass legislation in the House and the Senate. And then they did say that the Senate could make their own rules for like managing like how debate happens within the Senate. And from there was born the filibuster. And the filibuster has become this thing that is now requiring a 3/5 majority to pass any legislation at all. And the fact that it's a 3/5 majority is just painfully ironic in a lot of ways, if you think about it, considering that, once again, 3/5 as a number is causing all sorts of hell for people who are not a great number in America, throwing it out there. But 60 senators, that's 3/5 of the chamber, right? But basically that the filibuster is unconstitutional because the language of the Constitution says a simple majority is needed to pass legislation. And while technically a simple majority can pass legislation, if you can hold up all legislation with a 3/5 majority, then does it really, right? So the challenging the filibuster's constitutionality is one thing, except it's not a law, so that makes it difficult. Plus there's this court, which makes it difficult. So I don't know. A large part of the problem right now is that just the checks and the balances that were built in have been so corrupted that the things that are supposed to work aren't working, and it makes everybody lose faith in the institutions themselves. But it's not the institutions that are broken, it's the corruption of the institutions, which, to be fair, is a weakness of the institution, but it's a weakness that can be remedied if we can get a lifeline to the institution long enough with one election cycle and majority wins. With like if Democrats could just win majorities, like decent majorities in 24 and 28, just about every problem we're all pissed about could be not directly solved, but definitely on the way to being solved. You know? I'm just throwing.
Well, 17th Amendment was a response to corruption in that time.
Yeah.
And I think we need another amendment to respond to
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was,
now.
yeah, it was necessary when it happened, but I think it's now created a point where something else necessary needs to happen. And what that necessary thing is, I mean, I have ideas, but I'm not a fucking dictator, so I shouldn't get to decide. But I do think it's the kind of thing we should be talking about. And I don't think we should get like screamed at and called anti-American for talking about it. Like, no, I don't hate America when I suggest making changes to make it work better. It means I actually am very American because I embrace the living nature of the Constitution that James Madison gave to me as a living document that Thomas Jefferson told me to change with every generation. Y'all are the ones that haven't changed it since the fucking 70s. And I know technically it was 1992, but that one doesn't count to me because they passed an amendment in 1992 that James Madison wrote in 1796.
Yeah, they just got around to
shit
passing
like that.
it. It wasn't
They just never, yeah. So that one doesn't count. The last time we in modern America wrote something down that we added to the Constitution all by ourselves was 1971, and it was to let 18-year-olds vote. And they haven't gotten around to it yet. So that was a joke, but that was a
so
good one.
Gen Z, that was the boomers that did that. So Gen Z, you gotta come up with your own amendment.
It's
Gen
funny
Z
that you say that. It's funny that you say that because that's what I tell them all the time. I'm like, so y'all hate boomers, but you know what they did? They amended the Constitution.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? And every time I say it exactly like that, they're like, wait, really? I'm like, yeah, you can't let them show you up, man. They gave themselves, but they got voting rights without having any. What are you going to get yourselves? And like, you see the wheels start turning in their heads, like instantly. They're like, shit, I can't let the boomers do that. I'm like, you read, they already did, motherfucker. And that's why they're running the government. They run the government right now because when they were your age, they bothered to win voting rights and use them. You don't even use them.
Gen Z millennials, we got to do something. We got to get some.
No, but I wish I almost wish you could see their faces when I say it because, like, it's like the light bulb moment that teachers get where you see the light go off in their head. Like I see it happen. They're like, "Oh fuck, we can't let the boomers be better." It's just a matter of pride with them. They're like, "Fuck me, I'm gonna burn the world down." Then it's just the funniest thing. It's like they get so civically engaged.
The most boomery thing ever of all boomers. The boomers want to take that away. They want to take away the right of 18-year-olds to vote, like bump it up to 25%.
They want to take away the thing that they added.
They gave it to themselves, and then they want to take it away from everybody
take it away from everybody else.
That's the most
quite boomerific. But yeah, it's so funny that I get like 12 minutes of civic engagement out of the kids just out of spite for wanting to be better than boomers. It's so funny.
All right, well, we need to talk constitutional convention too. I really don't think the amendment process is working anymore either because of the fucking roadblocks that we put up for it. I think we just need to do everything in one fell swoop.
Because of the representative issues that we have, make it hard to change the representative issues we have. We're in a bit of a pickle. Is the truth of it.
Again, like go back to Ireland. So it's easier to change the Constitution in Ireland, but it's still hard to change the Constitution in Ireland. They do it on a popular referendum. So the upper house in Ireland kicks it to the people and the people vote. But before they do that, they have something called a citizens assembly, which I think is a fucking brilliant idea. What they do is they get an average, it's like a marathon poll. They get a group of, random sampling of likely voters, citizens, engaged citizens, and they sit them in a room and they basically, it's like a court. Both sides present an argument to this citizens assembly about, it's like, should we change the Constitution? Yes or no for this particular thing. And they deliberate on it for a long time. And then they have a vote. And the citizens assembly is, a cross section of the Irish public. So their vote is probably going to be in line with what the Irish people want. Mm-hmm. And then the politicians, so they want to amend the Constitution to make abortion legal, which is what just happened in 2018. Yeah. They had a citizens assembly. It passed the citizens assembly by 60% of the vote. Politicians took that. They took it. They made a popular referendum. They went, look, this passed citizens assembly with 60% of the vote. So we're going to take it to the people. And they amended the Constitution to give the right to abortion in Ireland, and it passed by 60% of the vote. So the Citizens Assembly was, right on with what the Irish people wanted. So I think I think popular referendum, kicking it right to the people to amend the Constitution is the way to go. This 2/3 of state thing is this is never going to happen. You're never going to amend the Constitution again. I mean, it's just not in the divided environment that we have now.
Well, I would say that like you're less likely to, but remember, to get a citizens council like that would require a constitutional amendment. But you know what
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
say is that oddly enough, the same way that the 17th Amendment passed, I think the 28th Amendment could pass to make that happen, because people do like to have a say in their own lives. And if you tell them, like, hey, because if we've all kind of gotten to the point where we can understand that the only way to fix anything at this point is to amend the Constitution. And then we all land on, oh, but it's impossible to amend the Constitution, right? But if you offer an amendment to the Constitution to put the power of amending the Constitution in the hands of the voters, I think that's a type of amendment you could get through, right? Like, they're going to kill any gun control amendment. They're going to kill any other amendment. But like, do you want to be the senator speaking out against letting people vote for their own constitution? Like, like perhaps the MAGAs would be on board because they're all anti-democracy now anyway, even though they started 2 wars in my lifetime to spread democracy throughout the world. But now we don't want democracy. It's fine. I just want to set things on fire. It's cool. It's fine. But I think that, like, if I was a Democratic strategist, I would be tossing that around focus groups right now, seeing where it lands with Democratic voters. And like,
yeah, totally.
Because that's what they've got to be. They've got to be running on a way to put control back in people's hands. Because the reason that Democratic voters lose faith is because they feel like they don't have control. They feel outnumbered and they feel bullied by Republicans. So if you can give them, like, to that word, like, Democrats need hope. If you give them a little bit of hope that this is something we could possibly do, that's what'll fire them up and get them involved again, I think.
And we want to make changes to our federal government, and we can't. We don't have national popular referendums. We have state referendums.
And like, those have been very
referendums to change the laws in states, but we don't have like federal referendums to change the federal government. I think we need to.
And that's why I think it would be a really good sell for a federal amendment, because they exist in enough states and they're popular and effective in enough states that people would understand what that amendment is. Because another reason people don't like doing things is because they're afraid of what it would mean. But like, they know what a referendum on the ballot would mean. So do you think the U.S. Constitution should be changed by referendum?
Right.
And you can even change it that it would require 60% vote threshold. Like, I'm fine with it being a 60% federal majority necessary to amend the Constitution. I'm cool with that. But I do think that's a good solution. And I think that
there would be so many if you just had, like, okay, fine, 60%. But if you had a national popular referendum, there would be so many positive changes that would happen to our government and our country. If you just left it to the people, we would actually begin to enact some of the things we want. And I'm telling you, it's because we have this fucking Senate and this filibuster that we're not
because
getting.
We have the Senate and the filibuster.
But the other thing with the Citizens Assembly is politicians can then lean on it. It gives them an out, right? Like, if they're like, if a politician is opposed to something, but the Citizens Assembly supports it, they can go back to their constituents and they can go, look, man, like, I did what I could, but the Citizens Assembly supports it, so I got to get behind it. It's what the people want, that kind of thing.
But that's going to be the biggest roadblock to anything like that happening here, because I hate to tell you all this, but Republicans don't like democracy because they don't want to represent you. They want to rule you.
Yeah.
And there is a big difference between having a ruler and a leader. And Republicans want a ruler, and the rest of us want a leader. So just throwing that out there as well.
We should leave it at that because we're over time. Republicans want to rule you is our final word. Thanks, Cathy, for a great conversation. Good deep dives. Love it. We'll hit the EU stuff and the UK stuff probably next week.
I'm going to tear the Tories apart. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic.
That's going to be fun to listen to, Cathy.
Oh, and P.S. I was thinking about this because we were thinking about we need a Patreon like only subscriber deep divey stuff, and I've been rewatching House of the Dragon because the new season is starting.
Yeah, I got to do that.
And it reminded me, right? Because you like it too. What if we do, and patrons, whatever they're called, let us know. Do you want deep dive content of Troy and I unpacking Westerosi politics?
That would be amazing.
We could even like designate political parties, like the Lannister party versus the Stark party. I'm telling you.
Let's write a constitution for Westeros.
A Westerosi constitution.
Yeah, we'll develop a Westerosi republic.
A Westerosi republic for post Targaryen rule.
Post Targaryen, or maybe even like post Baratheon Republic.
Well, no, because House of the Dragon, it's the civil war between the.
No, I know, but I'm talking like
but
the end of like present day, like the end of the original series, like
yes,
where we should go with that.
too. And also, did you ever finish The Good Place? Because I feel like the patrons deserve.
I was just going to tell you, I'm about 2 episodes away from the finale.
Oh, really? Do you love
Yeah.
it? You love it, don't you?
I absolutely love it. I think we should deep dive it. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So we could do a whole season by season recap of The Good Place, season 1 recap, 2 like whatever, and then that could be a 5-episode deep dive, right? 1 for each season, and then a full series synopsis.
I love it. Let's do it.
So patrons, if you like this idea, right, let us know and we'll do it. And also, if you would watch it, go ahead and sign up for Patreon, because like that's always cool. It makes me feel special.
Sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/justbuylesscoffee. Subscribe, $5 a month. Get access to these exclusive deep dives, pre-show content, exclusive guest content, some other goodies. If you're listening to the regular episodes on podcast directories like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, some of these other ones, download the episode to your local device. Download numbers are how we're ranked with other news and political podcasts. If you want to see the video content, head on over to YouTube, youtube.com/justbuylesscoffee. You can watch our pretty mugs as we discuss these topics. Thank you, Cathy, for a great conversation. Yay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Join us next week for Cathy's UK Tory deep dive, Torying apart the Tories or something like that. And we will see everybody next time. You've been listening to Just Buy Less Coffee, answering the deeper questions of American politics, featuring Troy Matthews at Keep Troy Blue and Cathy Cannon at Cannon's Fodder. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and X. All opinions are our own.